Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that Mr. Nuzzo and Ms. Bradish, you just responded that you would not support non-transferability. Very briefly, could you explain why not?
Well, I think it goes to a regulatory solution to something that should be a competition issue. If there were competition, if we solve the competition issue here, then customers will get what they want. So I think this is, it doesn't get to the heart of the matter, essentially.
Mr. Nuzzo?
Yes, thank you very much, Senator. It's a good question, and ultimately we would look at it in a couple of ways. One is a property rights issue. As an individual purchasing a ticket, I should have the ability to transfer that ticket at a market rate. Secondly, I would point to a statistic, I believe it was from a GAO report, that close to, if not a majority of the tickets on the resale market are going for under the market value. So while I would, contend that, I'm not going to pay $500, let alone $5,000 to go see Taylor Swift, the secondary market allows, kind of artists like the band Lawrence, who are selling to smaller venues and are growing, the ability to fill those venues, especially when those cases come where an individual is unable to use their ticket.
So isn't Ticketmaster also in the secondary market?
I believe the largest secondary market is StubHub, but I do believe Ticketmaster is either building or growing a secondary.
So I'm surprised that Mr. Berchtold says that he would definitely support non-transferability. Nothing is simple. Mr. Lawrence, as you sit here, can you tell me, what you hope will happen after this hearing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that we have a few specific things that we would just love to see changed in the industry, however we're able to get there. To list a few, I think that dealing with this whole inconsistency around ancillary revenues, which is something that we're not talking about as much today, the idea that Live Nation or frankly most promoters typically take 20% or more of our gross merchandise sales from the night, under the idea that they're providing the real estate, but we're providing all the customers. As Mr. Nuzzo was talking about, you say you're going to see a Harry Styles show, you're not going to XYZ Arena. So how come we don't get any of their bar sales? That's one example. I could keep listing more. Expansion of off-platform ticketing or ticketing choice, caps on fees, like we're talking about. Greater transparency on the settlement sheets that we receive at the end of the night. That's a whole other conversation, but I could list 10 things about the way those are formatted and broken out in a way that feels not totally ideal or fair to artists. I could go on and on.
So there are a number of things that we can do. Do these kinds of things for you to be able to probably negotiate better. Ms. Bradish, do we have to change any laws in order to enable an artist like Mr. Lawrence to do what he wants to be able to do?
Well, I think we need to support strong antitrust enforcement. We have to give the agencies the resources and the legislation, the clarity of legislation that will enable them to attack practices like this. So yes, we need to support and give resources to the existing antitrust agencies and the existing laws, and we should consider other laws like Senator Klobuchar's law that would clarify and strengthen those antitrust laws.
Also the BOSS Act, which Senator Blumenthal's bill, which I signed on to, which creates greater transparency. Yes. You testified, Ms. Bradish, that there should be a presumption for vertical mergers as we do for horizontal mergers. What would that presumption be for vertical mergers?
Well, for vertical mergers, we can obviously look at the share in a particular market. We can look at the ability of the monopolist to exercise power in another market, downstream or upstream. There are a number of ways to get at the same problem, but the idea is that you give the DOJ or FTC a foothold in order to be able to bring the case before a court, a foothold to be able to say this is illegal.
Do we need to amend the Sherman Act to create such a presumption for vertical mergers, or do we need to strengthen the Clayton Act, Section 7?
Well, I think that the current Clayton Act and Sherman Act don't have the presumptions for horizontal mergers. Those come from the case law. So we don't necessarily need to change the fundamental contours of the Clayton Act and the Sherman Act. In fact, I would suggest that the Clayton Act already builds this in.
The Live Nation Ticketmaster merger has already occurred. I'm interested in what we can do to prevent this kind of market share capture in other vertical mergers. I just want to mention that we've been talking a lot about the debacle, I would say, of the Taylor Swift situation. And back in 2018, thousands of people in Hawaii tried and failed to get Bruno Mars tickets, and similar kinds of occurrences happened in Hawaii. And I heard Mr. Berkeley will say that after the merger, they spent $1 billion to improve the Ticketmaster system. And so so you had in 2018, quite a few years after the merger, you had this similar kind of situation with Bruno Mars, and then you have Taylor Swift. So I'm just wondering what kind of improvements to the Ticketmaster system that is actually being followed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Hirono, for using that example. Next